everyone, and welcome to the second series of haunted places. So today we are going to be going to the Lower East Side and visiting Greenwich Village. I don't have Cassie today, but I do have another Sagittarius in the house. Woo! This is Mason, BFF and now we're roommates. So he's going to come along with me today. So feel free to ask questions, even though I probably don't have the answer. Yay!
Let's do this.
So I'm going to be like masked or unmasked depending on who's around me and all that. Anyways, we're going to go to Starbucks and then we have to go to Staples because my printer ran out of ink last night, so I need to print what I'm going to say. Yeah, and then we're going to start. Starbucks! Woo! You going to come with us on a haunted tour? Hi. She's coming with us. No, she's about to take another poop. Bye. This train stop should be packed right now, but it's not.
Me and all my friends.
We're completely safe alone in this subway
here.
stop. There's literally no one here.
I think there's
If anyone thought that New York was not safe, there's literally no one here.
It's like
This is great. It's just like so much space.
nobody. It's amazing.
Alright, so we just got off at 3rd Avenue, which is where I used to get off to go to work. So this is kind of depressing, but we are actually going to pass by Blue Man Group on the way to our first location, so you will get to see that. But first we need to go to Staples so I can know what I'm going to say. Where are we?
Union Square!
This beautiful church. Thank you. Okay, so we are heading to our first location, but first we're gonna stop by Blue Man Group and have a little bit of a moment because we're passing by it on the way. So I'll show you it. So here it is, Blue Man Group, where I used to work. Had a really good job. It was so much fun. And it's been closed for almost a year. Aww. Oh wait, this is a video.
It's a video.
That's fine. Woo! Yeah, so my office was down here. Now it's all locked up. It's been locked up for about a year now. Sad. All right. Across the street, this is also not on our list, but it is haunted. This is the Public Theater. They have shows here too, and this place is haunted, but it's not on our list because there wasn't a lot of information on it. But yeah, here's another building. It's beautiful. Let's start. So we are walking to 4th Street right now, and we are going to visit a building called the Merchant's House Museum. That is our first location on our Greenwich Village top 12 spooky locations in Lower Manhattan. And this is my second series. We're coming up on it now. This is the Merchant's House Museum. Oh yeah, we can just stand over here. So this, as you can tell, it's like super out of place in comparison to everything around it. And that's because everything around it has kind of been remodeled like the city. And there's been a lot of funding that's gone into keeping this building the way that it is. So that's why it's like the only thing that's standing here that looks like it's still from the 19th century. Typically in a non-pandemic, this place attracts thousands of people every year, from architects to historians and ghost hunters, because this place is a staple of the 19th century of what it looked like for an upper class family to live in Manhattan during that time. So Seabury Treadwell was a successful hardware merchant, and so he brought his family, his wife Eliza, and his 8 children, and they bought this house in the 19th century. And so that whole family grew up here, and that family lived here for about 100 years. His youngest child, Gertrude, was the last family member to die in this house, and she was 27 days shy of her 93rd birthday. And so the Treadwell family lived here for about 100 years. So after Gertrude died, a distant cousin realized the home's value in turning this place into a museum, and so he bought the property and turned it into a museum, and it's been a museum ever since. But this place is haunted. So right after this place was turned into a museum, people started noticing that weird stuff was going on, and that an apparition of Gertrude, like, people were like, this is Gertrude. She's seen walking around, and people that visit this museum often feel like they're gonna faint, especially in the parents' room. And that's said because Seabury was like a really hard parent, especially on his daughters. And it's also said that he kept Gertrude from marrying the love of her life, and that's why she never married. He was a good dad. He was just like a really tough dad. So when you enter the parents' room, there's just like an overwhelming energy in that room. So it's said that a lot of young women will faint in that room. So this place is haunted.
Boo.
Boo. Number one, this place is pretty amazing because over the years, as you can see, this area has been remodeled and rebuilt with like the rest of the city. And so people have fought really hard to keep this building the way that it is. And it's a museum of what life is in the 19th century. So when you go in this house, it's set up with the original furniture, and so you can get a glimpse into what it looked like back then. So a lot of people have fought and fundraised for this place. There's been a lot of water damage over the years, and so it's taken a lot of work and money to get this place to stay, running. And it actually received a $1 million grant in 1997, which kind of secured the future. But of course, the pandemic really hit the museum. So I'm going to put a link below. This is the only location on the list that I'm going to put a link for funding, because this is the only museum on the list. So I'm going to put a link below where you can donate to the museum if you feel so inclined. So I'm going to go closer now. Look at Mason. I'm going to go closer now and see it up close and see if we can see Gertrude. It's so beautiful, and I love that it's so different from anything around it. Like, you can tell that this building is just by itself here.
This is so tall and skinny.
Wow. This place has been declared a National Historical Landmark. Have you seen Gertrude yet?
Oh my god, she's right there.
Shut up. All right, guys, so we are coming up to our second location, which is the Brown Building. This building is owned by NYU, and it used to host the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory on the 8th through 10th floor. So I'm going to turn the camera around and show you the building. So behind me is the Brown Building, which on the 8th through 10th floors in the early 1900s used to be called the Ash Building. And on the 8th through 10th floors, there was a clothing factory, and mostly women. The youngest was 14 years old up to your mid 40s. Most of them were immigrants, and they were paid terribly, they were treated terribly, and they made clothing up there, mostly blouses, popular blouses, and they would slave the day away, 9 hours a day, on the 8th through 10th floor. So what happened was, back then it was common for owners of the building to lock the workers inside of the building, except for a 15-minute break during the day, because of fear of them stealing stuff and taking undocumented breaks. So that's ridiculous, but that was just common back then until this situation happened. On March 25th, 1911, a fire broke out from a cigarette being thrown into a trash can somewhere on the 8th floor. The workers were trapped inside because they had locked the doors from the outside and people couldn't get out. So a few people escaped from the elevator, which stopped working shortly after the fire spread to the 10th floor because of the heat. And then there was a fire escape ladder that some people got out of, but shortly it collapsed because of the amount of people that were climbing down the ladder. So all in all, and then unfortunately a lot of people jumped to their deaths right here. So the public was all, you know, watching the fire break out right here in 1911 on that March 25th afternoon. It was like 15 minutes before the day was over and the workers were going to be released. And so, yeah, the public sat here and unfortunately witnessed like 50 people jump to their deaths. Most of the workers that passed away that day were women, Italian and Jewish immigrants as young as 14 years old. And all in all, 146 workers died that day. And it was the greatest loss of life until 9/11. This event was so tragic and heartbreaking for the citizens of New York, but it did spark change in workers' rights. And while this was all happening, like the year before this happened, people were already striking for workers' rights because it's awful that people were locked inside during the day and there were no fire escape protocols for fire safety and building codes that are still in place today and keep us safe where we are. So yeah, that's the story of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, and it is haunted. And people, especially people that are like security guards that have worked here for a long time, confirm that it's haunted. And I don't know, gotta check out the windows up there from the 8th to 10th floor and see if you can see anybody. But truly tragic. And you want to know what's messed up? Even more what's messed up is that the owners of the building got really good lawyers, and so there was no justice for these mostly women. There were some men in there, but mostly women. They did have to pay $75 per victim just for like a senseless loss of life. $75 per person, but they weren't charged for like manslaughter or anything because they got really good lawyers. So yeah, privilege. So we just ran into a security guard and he was like, let me guess, you're like the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. And then he's like, yeah, you definitely hear noises up there. That was funny. So we just came around the corner from the Brown building and we are now looking at the Bobst Library, which is part of NYU. Also, okay, we'll just go back here for a sec. So this is where the Brown building is, and it is owned by NYU. So here we go, the Bobst Library. So this is probably the largest building on our list of haunted locations, and this is number 3. This building opened in 1982, and it is a 12-story library filled with the busy minds of university students of NYU. As a college graduate, I can tell you that the stress of college is no fun, and for many students, it brought them to their own ends in this very building, all jumping from suicide.
Wow.
They all passed away by suicide, and that's very scary. Great.
All in one place.
So people say that this library, that sentence is terrible. People notably remark when they visit this library that they feel like an existential sense of dread, like more than just normal college dread. And if you know what that feels like, you know what that feels like. And being in this library, I guess, is just like way more than just your normal college dread. So the question is this building cursed? And I mean, it's named after pharmaceutical tycoon Elmer Holmes Bobst, who was proven to be a racist, homophobic, and a pedophile. So I feel like this building is haunted, and they should definitely change the name of the building.
And he beat his wife.
So he's a terrible person, and I'm sure this building is cursed just because of this man. And we'll get to like why this whole area is also haunted when we get to Washington Square Park. But moving on, this building was also heavily protested before it was built in the late 1980s because if you can see, Washington Square Park is like right next to it, which we'll get to, but the residents were like, we don't want you to build this huge building like right next to the park because you're going to block the sunlight. Like the sunlight is for the park and it's not to be blocked by this huge building. So no one wanted this building here. That's what I'm trying to say. Great. So so legend says, I couldn't find like any confirmed sources of this, but it is said that at least 20 people have died in this building, but 2 unrelated suicides happened in 2003. And so after that, they built like aluminum things, and I'll show you once we get closer. They built aluminum things around the staircases so that way people couldn't jump anymore, and you'll see how crazy it looks when we get up close. But they literally built barriers like around the staircases so that people would stop jumping. Somebody did end up getting through in 2009, and that is the last suicide in this building that happened. Also, the floor on the ground is like marble, and it's black dots. I'll put a picture over, but it's meant to be like an optical illusion to deter people from jumping as well. Great. Aside from the feeling of dread that seems to overcome people that study here, people say that they can hear paper shuffling late at night, and sometimes an apparition that looks like an old librarian will come and, check out your books with you. So let's get a little bit closer, shall we? Look how huge this building is, just right next to the park. It's just like huge. It's just gloomy. So we're actually going inside. This is so cool. Oh my God. So we are now at 85 West 3rd Street, which is also owned by NYU, and it's called Furman Hall now. And the reason that it is famous is because Edgar Allan Poe lived here for about 2 years, from 1844 to 1846, and in this building he wrote some of his famous works, one of them being the Cask of Amontillado and the Raven, both pretty dark materials, which is said to have been dark because of what he experienced here. Some hauntings. Furman Hall is actually this whole building right here. So when NYU wanted to expand their law school, they made the decision to demolish this house right here, but to kind of pay homage to where Edgar Allan Poe lived, they kept the front of it, which I think is kind of like a cop-out because they didn't really keep the building. They just kept the front of it and then tried to
build around it.
Yeah, they tried to build around it. Right, so
like that
little house is where Edgar Allan Poe lived for 2 years and wrote those famous works. And then now this whole building is Furman Hall. So the only thing that is left of Edgar Allan Poe's house is a little banister that we're gonna go up close and see. You can see it from the window, and it's said that you can see him moving down the banister. So that's pretty freaky. So let's go up and see it close. I don't know if you can see it from my camera, but there's the banister right there.
The stair banister.
Yeah. This is like kind of creepy that we're just like looking through the window. Can you see it? Oh, you can see it a little bit better from back here. It's like in the corner. It's up against the wall. We'll try. Is anyone in there?
Can you zoom?
Yeah, but you can't really see it. Anyways, the banister is in there. There it is. You can see it. That's the only thing that's left of Edgar Allan Poe's house, and you can see him going up and down the banister sometimes. Edgar Allan Poe resided here. Do you see it? Do you see Edgar Allan Poe?
No. Oh my god, wait. Well, I see his face printed on a little book.
Okay, so we were at Furman Hall, and we literally just crossed the street and turned around, and this is our 4th location, which is Fire Patrol Building number 2. This building became Fire Patrol House number 2 in 1906. It was actually not run by the New York Fire Department. Back then, the city used to do a very poor job at managing fires in such a populated place like New York City. So they created this band of people called the New York Board of Fire Underwriters, which was created in an effort to represent property loss of businesses. So this is where they hung out and represented property lost in fires. And firefighters would hang out here and stuff like that. It was a very fun time. So before it became Fire Patrol House number 2, it was actually a brothel. It was a very famous brothel. It was run by the famous French Madame, famous for hosting some of the city's most important clients, such as lawyers, emergency workers, soldiers, and police officials. Ooh, scandalous. She made bank, but she spent it most on keeping the police off her back. So So there was obviously some shit that went down here. This fire patrol house number 2 kept being like the New York Board of Fire Underwriters for a really long time until 9/11, and then they all kind of like jumped in on that, and shortly after the group disbanded. And then in 2011, Anderson Cooper bought the building. Everyone know who Anderson Cooper is, right?
He owns it now?
He lives there, yeah.
What?
So this is Anderson Cooper's property, and he renovated it into a luxury apartment. So this is his home.
So he lives here like now?
So he lives here, yes.
Wow.
I mean, as far as I know, he still lives here, or he has multiple properties, but he definitely owns it. Great. So it is now Anderson Cooper's home. It is said to be haunted by a ghost called Schwartz, and he has been seen in casual wear and also dressed in like firefighters like garments. So he is a old firefighter. And it said that he hung himself on the top floor because he found out his wife was cheating on him. So he just mopes around here all the time. So that's Schwartz. And then blah, blah, blah. There are claims of spirits of other firemen, the patrons of the French Madame, and even children reside here as well with Anderson Cooper. Anderson Cooper has brought in multiple mediums, and that has all been confirmed. Okay, everyone, so our next location is not a building, it's the entire Washington Square Park, which actually kind of loops in all of the buildings that we've been talking about, because Washington Square Park is part of a bigger area that was actually built on top of Indian burial grounds. So
sounds like Ohio.
Yeah, so it's actually a beautiful day today, and we are walking up on Washington Square Park, and all of the buildings that we visited are circling this park, and which is most famously known for its arch. It's a great place to meet up. I used to like come here all the time. So let's go sit on a bench. No, wait, let's go sit at the fountain, and then I'll tell you what happened here. Okay? When this land was found in the 19th century, it was originally inhabited by the Iroquois Indian tribe. This area was their ceremonial burial ground, and then the Dutch drove them out, like many of the actual stories that have happened in the land of the United States of
Typical
America.
just white people stealing indigenous land.
Typical. Anyways, so that's just bad vibes all around from the get-go of this area. So Iroquois natives in ghost form can be seen wandering in full tribal gear at parts. I have been back here at night, and I haven't seen any Native Americans walking around, but I would like to see a spirit here someday. After the colonists took over the land and started to build up New York City, this area became a community for free black slaves. In 1797, this area was purchased by the city, and while their city was growing, they needed a place to hold their, more terrible things, such as public hangings.
Yes.
Hello.
Can I get a spitful of dollars?
I do not, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, guys. Big ones.
Okay, moving on. The city of New York needed a place to do their public hanging, so of course they chose, the budding black community that was starting around here. And they named it Potter's Field, so hundreds of people were hanged and buried under where we are sitting right now. The wind. It is said that if you walk under the hanging tree, you might hear the ungodly sound of people being hanged above your head and swinging in the trees. So while we were walking here, I was trying to figure out which tree was the hanging tree. I've found it before. It's one of the trees in the corner. So we're gonna figure that out and show you. Great. So the criminals, mentally impaired, ill, and outcasted victims of the city all laid right here. The Washington Square Park began to be constructed in 1849, but at that time hundreds of thousands of people were buried here. The bodies have, as far as we know, have been exhumed and reburied, but still today, during sort of any renovation and construction that happens around here, people still stumble upon human remains in coffins.
Ooh. It's called Hangman's Elm.
Yeah, so I think it's...
So probably over here.
Yeah, it's this way. So anyways, this whole entire area has really, really bad vibes because of what happened here. Like Indian burial grounds, as well as like this whole park used to be a place where they would hang people. So we're gonna go find the tree. The pigeons. But it is like a beautiful park. It just makes me feel gross knowing that there's bodies underneath where we're walking around.
Birds in my face and dead bodies underneath you.
Dead bodies underneath us.
Apparently the hangman's elm, which is the tree that we're talking about, is 310 years old. And it is, as a result, many believe it to be the oldest existing tree in Manhattan today.
What?
So it's pretty mind-blowing. We got a lot of
This is
concrete.
incredible.
Not a lot of trees though.
Incredibly sad.
Ew.
So there it is. In the summer, obviously, it is filled with leaves and stuff, but this is the tree that if you walk under, you might hear the sound of people being hanged and stuff. It's quite icky.
I mean, like a little plaque.
Well, the thing about that is that no one is proud of a hanging tree
Yeah, I guess you're right.
in the middle of a black community
That's true.
in the 1900s. So of course they don't have any signs. Like, this tree is obviously historically important, but it's not a good look for white America.
No.
So we are now on 10th Street, which is almost entirely full of haunted addresses. As you can tell, it's like a very wealthy street, which is what makes it all more surprising. Great. So
Money.
these are some of the most haunted. Make sure my hand's not on the microphone. These are some of the most haunted buildings in New York City. The houses have been known to be haunted even when Mark Twain lives in number 14. Where did it go? So Mark Twain lived in number 14 for 1 year, from 1900 to 1901. Twain was a true disbeliever of the paranormal, even though one night he saw a piece of wood floating by his fireplace, even though there was nothing there. He shot the piece of wood and blood appeared on the floor. Still, Twain did not let go that there was an explanation of rats or something. It's just super interesting that that after he died, residents have said to have seen Mark Twain, who, when seen, has referred to himself as Clemens, which is his real name. Mark Twain is a pseudonym. Samuel Clemens. Great. So over time, because when Mark Twain lived here, it was his full mansion. It was converted into a multi-apartment building. And then at number 16, which is right over here, I believe. Yeah, so number 16, a woman named Jan Bryant Bartell moved there in the late 50s, and she began experiencing paranormal activity. So she moved out and moved to 14, where it got worse and tormented her for 7 years.
So she moved next door.
So she moved next door, trying to get away from the paranormal activity. Great.
Well,
I'm just going to sit right here.
That's her own damn fault.
Yeah, but she wrote a book called Spindrift, Spray from a Psychic Sea, which is her memoir recounting all of her paranormal experiences and torture that happened in this building right here. So what happened to her is she said she felt a monstrous presence around her, and her dog used to growl at a certain chair in the corner in the apartment. She eventually had a medium come, who was then apparently possessed during the seance by a 19-year-old girl whose husband was killed in the Civil War, as well as her, she had an abortion or something, and her baby is there too. And a cat.
Whoa.
There's a ghost cat, a gray cat. After that experience, Bartell moved, but felt like the house had poisoned her, and she died later of mysterious circumstances. Number 14. Now this is the messed up story right here. Number 14 claimed its name the House of Death in 1987 after Lisa Steinberg, the 6-year-old illegal adopted daughter of famous attorney Joel Steinberg, was beaten to death by her own father in this building right here in the basement.
Fuck.
6 years old. Yeah. This crime shook the entire city, especially because this area is like wealthy and, you know, people apparently don't kill their kids if they have a lot of money. I don't know. But yeah, that was a terrible, terrible crime. And there's actually a Law & Order SVU episode called Indifference that is based on this crime. And I've seen it 100 times. And I immediately recognized that this was the crime that was based off, that episode was based off of. And this place is apparently haunted by 22 ghosts. There is a musician currently living on the 3rd floor of number 16 that has confirmed that this stuff happens. And he says that he sees women in long dresses walking around all the time. And
Like right in here.
yeah, right in here.
Damn.
Yep. Number 18, which is down. Let's just go down there. I think we're done with number 14. But anyways, number 14 is the House of Death. Okay, so right next door at number 18, this was the house of Emma Lazarus, who was the poet who wrote the work The New Colossus, and it said that she has been seen to lurk in her old quarters. She has been seen to lurk in her old quarters, her chambers. Also in number 17, which is across the street over here, our old friend Edgar Allan Poe jumps over here sometimes. He also lived in this residence. This was his last residence known in New York City, and it said that a woman rejected his marriage proposal in that building, so that sucks.
Wait, what house number?
17.
Okay.
So across the street. Great. So this is 10th Street, and this is a very haunted block of buildings.
Very freaky.
Very freaky. Very freaky
Beautiful,
energy.
but scary.
Oh wait, there's Emma. Lived here. Emma, are you here? Emma. So, thinking about what happened in those buildings, I have to wonder, was Joel Steinberg, possessed by whatever energy was in that building, or was he just, a terrible person? What do you think?
I feel like it...
Or
I
just
don't
like
know.
whatever energy was in that house just like brought out
I was gonna
something
say,
really, really bad.
Well, also the fact that he like illegally adopted his daughter before doing what he did to her, like tells
Right.
me, like,
He was shady.
yeah, like
He was shady.
I picture it as being like a progression. Like maybe that wasn't his plan going in, but then he like started feeling sketchy and doing the sketchy illegal thing, and
Right.
then, like, when
And that he was
had
a
her-
prominent New York City lawyer. Like, it makes me just not trust
Yeah.
anybody.
Feels like the spirit was embedding itself into him further and further
For sure.
as he was like living.
For sure. Okay, so less than a 1-minute block from the series of houses on 10th Street, we come across this beautiful building, the Jefferson Market Library. So the Jefferson Market Library was originally built to be a fire tower lookout in 1833. And then it turned into a courthouse in 1877 and was New York City's first official night court. Ooh. Dun dun. It served as a women's prison as well. It was converted to a library in the 1960s, and the prison, which was in the back of it, is now a garden. Ghosts are seen to be walking along the balcony that's up here. See that? And a young woman who waves and smiles at people inside the library and then disappears.
Freaky.
Yeah, so that's kind of the story of that, but it is truly a gorgeous building. So let's get a little bit closer. Woo! So pretty. You can see the World Trade Center from right here in the distance. 1967.
This was constructed during like the height of the civil rights movement.
Oh yeah. It is interesting. So now we're coming on the garden, which is behind the library. So these grounds right here used to be where the women's prison was built, and it's quite a bit of area. So yeah, prisoners are seen to be walking through the gardens here. Women's prisoners. Crazy. Wow. So our next location is my favorite street in the entire city, which is the shortest street in the entire city, and that is Gay Street. So we're going to be turning the corner right here, and it is a very, very small, quaint street that's over before you even know it. So we're on this really, really short street right here. This is called Gay Street. And we are looking for number 12. 12 Gay Street. 12. So this street has been used for a lot of movies and music videos, and we have found 12. Okay. So behind me is 12 Gay Street, which is home to one of the oldest and most famous speakeasies that happened in the Prohibition era, which happened in the basement. This area used to be for stables back in the time when Waverly Place first opened, so they would keep their horses here. So that's probably why it's so short, is it was meant to be for stables. Great. This townhouse behind me was owned by the corrupt mayor Jimmy Walker during the Prohibition era, and it was in the basement was his speakeasy called the Pirate's Den. The sounds of flapper heels are heard on the floors, and sometimes you can see women dressed in 1920s clothing. So basically this place is just a rave all the time.
Doing the Charleston.
Yeah, and doing the Charleston. After a medium was brought in, it was determined that at some point when the Pirate's Den was operating, a French diplomat was tortured and killed at some point, and his ghost haunts this place.
Yikes.
Yeah, so a lot of energy.
Ooh.
Also in this building, the absolutely terrifying puppet, Howdy Doody, I'll put a photo on. It's a really awful looking puppet, was created in the basement of this building by puppeteer creator Frank Harris I think it's Frank Paris. I don't know. I'll tell you later when I look it up, to be determined. It was created in the 60s. There's also a puppet theater in the basement. And there's also a shadow man, phantom, that walks the streets. He kind of looks like like Zorro with the like black hat and walking around. So this street is like super short and very quiet. And sometimes you'll see the shadow man walking up and down the street. Just like that. Yes. Yeah, so let me know if you see him when we're walking around here. God, I just love this street. It's so beautiful. But anyways, that's down here at some point is where a French diplomat was tortured and murdered trying to get information out of him. Yeah, and flappers dance down here.
Like it looks very fresh and clean.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
It's beautiful.
Considering
yeah, this street is like way dirtier than I remember. But anyways, as we're leaving Gay Street, you can see that Waverly Place is right here. So it was super convenient for people to leave their horses down Gay Street. By Gay Street. It's literally so short.
I can't believe it. And it's also curved, which is very unique. It's
curved and it's like so quiet compared to like what this area actually is like.
It's almost like shaped like the letter J.
Yeah. Yep. So this location is not on our list of haunted places, but it's important for all of the Disney fans in the world to know that the Waverly restaurant is right around the corner from Gay Street. So here's the Waverly restaurant. Yay! I don't even remember the theme song.
So good. Like, so good. But I said, everything is you want it in your wildest dreams. You might run into trouble if you know
streams, because everything is not. So this location on our list is not haunted, but we could not go through this area and not discuss the Stonewall Inn because of how important it is, especially if you if you're queer or if you enjoy dancing in clubs whatsoever. You have to look up Stonewall Inn and get on your knees and thank these people for what they did, because we would not be able to express ourselves in the way that we want to if the Stonewall riots didn't happen. Great. So
there she be. There's
the Stonewall Inn right now. It's obviously in the middle of construction, so you can't really bask in its glory. So what happened here in the 1960s, literally 60 years ago, 60 years ago, gay marriage was illegal and queerness in general was ridiculed heavily. Cops would raid this gay club often, deeming that people simply expressing themselves was considered disorderly conduct. So you could get arrested for, acting gay. If they thought you were gay, it was considered disorderly conduct and you could be arrested. So the Stonewall was secretly operating as a gay bar because it was owned by the mafia, who paid off the cops to walk away or tip them off if a raid was coming so they'd hide the alcohol. However, the mafia family cut costs wherever they wanted to, and the bar was in terrible conditions, such as no running water to, wash the cups. Nonetheless, it was a refuge to so many homeless gay and trans teenagers and young adults shunned from their families, so they put up with it until one day, on June 28th, 1969, the police raided without any warning, and the gay community fought back by leading violent riots and demonstrations, and even holding police hostage inside. They protested until July 3rd. Those demonstrations were a huge growth in the budding gay liberation movement and at the time of the riots. And it is the first national landmark for gay rights. Woo! Woo! We have to thank a couple of people, and I'll put their photos above this. Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera were two of the most famous rioters, who were two of the initial leaders in the riots, trans people, as well as Stormy Delivery, who is said to have thrown the first punch. We have a lot to thank for them, that's for sure.
Yes,
so
baby.
Here we are, Stonewall Inn.
Queer power.
Also, this place has been heavily impacted by the pandemic, so. Woo!
There's Joe.
There's Joe. 1969. Who are you? Oh, this is Gay Liberation Monument. Oh, okay, I get it now. They're gay couples. Cute.
So these were constructed in 1979.
Look at you. Third wheel.
I don't want to touch them because I feel bad. They're so little. Babies.
Look at her shoes. So we are in front of the restaurant called One If by Land, Two If by Sea. This beautiful restaurant that I certainly could not afford is said to have at least 20 ghosts hanging out right here. It looks super dead, but we looked inside and it's definitely still open. Not sure because of COVID. I didn't know if any of these buildings were going to be here. So the staff confirms that there's still a lot of activity here, like furniture moving, getting pushed, and servers waiting on mysterious people that mysteriously disappear. People have actually quit over these experiences. It is rumored that Vice President Aaron Burr haunts this place since it was his carriage house at a point. He lived there with his daughter Theodosia, who was the light of his life after his wife died. Her boat mysteriously disappeared while making a trip to New York City from her hometown in South Carolina. So her ghost and Aaron Burr's ghost are confirmed to be in here.
Freaky.
He later married the famous Eliza and then divorced 4 months later, so that was good for him. Him and his daughter haunt this building as well as many others from various decades. After his duel with Alexander Hamilton, Burr's carriage house was taken away from him when his political career, dwindled, and much of his other properties were taken away from him. From then it's been a brothel, a saloon, and now it is a restaurant. So there are many ghosts from different decades that hang out here. So let's take a look inside real quick. And here you see they have their COVID safe seating outside. But inside, I don't know if you can even see. I don't know how to make it so you can see. Okay, now you can kind of see. I guess this place is very famous for multiple proposals happening inside here. But yeah, there it is. Inside of One If by Land, Two If by Sea. Eliza! So as we are walking to our last location, do you have any remarks?
Okay, well, first of all, disobey COVID nonsense. That's a bullshit. But in terms of the ghost tour, I don't know, I'm still really shook by the NYU area with the Triangle Factory.
Yeah.
And then the Tisch Library, or not the Tisch Library, but the NYU Library.
The Bobst.
Yeah, that one really got me. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing how so much has happened and people are now just eating food at these places. It's really crazy.
Yep.
And you would have no idea walking into these establishments that there's so much that had happened before.
Just walking on top of dead bodies.
Yeah, it's insane.
Okay, so behind me is our last location on our list because it was a little bit of a walk. This is the White Horse Tavern, built in 1880. This old bar is where artists, poets, and performers used to hang out all the time. They pretty much still are. Poet Dylan Thomas went on a 2-day drinking binge in 1953, and then he died that day. So his ghost is here.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and so
That's a bender.
he has a table in the tavern that's like his spot that he used to hang out in, and it's said that there's like a lot of commotion always at that table where he used to hang out with his friends. This place is haunted by several other poets and performers like Bob Dylan and Jim Morrison and Jane Jacobs, who was a village activist. The last thing I have to say is they got their liquor license taken away from not hindering to the COVID protocols, so I don't really care if they make it, honestly. But I'm sure that there are plenty of ghosts drinking to keep them occupied during COVID. But anyways, this is our last location. So thank you for coming on this haunted walking tour with me today.
Fun.
So fun. Very educational and a perfectly safe COVID activity to do. Okay, so we're actually adding a location to the list because when we went to go get on the train, we realized that the Chelsea Hotel, was closer than we realized. I didn't add it to the list because this is a walking tour and I didn't want to have to walk too far, but it's actually really close to the train. So I'm gonna film it and then go home and like put voiceover of the history and stuff, because I didn't research anything about it. So this hotel was built between 1883 and 1885. I don't think it's anything anymore. It was never really like a functioning hotel. It was actually the first private housing cooperative, and it was fully run and lived in by like artists and creatives. Dylan Thomas actually spent the time that he wasn't drinking at the tavern that we were just at. When he got ill, he was at this hotel nearby. I believe it has not been running since 2011, and this is where you can catch some celebrity ghosts, including Dylan Thomas, who was also haunting our last location. So yeah, it's huge. It's not open anymore. So let's get a little bit closer and see what it looks like.
One more fun fact is that Arthur C. Clarke wrote 2001 The Space Odyssey while staying at this hotel.
Ooh.
Pretty cool.
I'm sure there's a lot of stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
There is a grand staircase that grows 10 floors that is only visible to registered guests. There are so many famous people that have lived here, and I will name a few. Mark Twain, Sarah Bernhardt, Thomas Wolfe, Dylan Thomas, Bob Dylan, Patti Smith, The Grateful Dead, Janis Joplin, Leonard Cohen, Andy Warhol, and Madonna were here. This place is haunted by Mary the ghost, who is a Titanic survivor, and is also haunted by a girl named Nadia, who is called the severed hand ghost, because I guess she threw herself out of a window because she was sad and decided to cut her hand off and end it all, but the pain was too much, so she jumped out the window. And then there's a ghost named Larry, who is a hippie ghost, and talks nonstop. Tell us.
Okay, so this is from Wikipedia, so don't quote me, but Nancy Spungen, a girlfriend of Sid Vicious, who is from the Sex Pistols, she was found stabbed to death on October 12th, 1978 in this hotel. Pretty freaky.
Pretty freaky. Oh wait, there's people in there. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
It's cool. Huh? Ask.
If you could at least be introduced,
I know.
motherfucker.
So we went inside and we got in trouble for filming, but then we asked the front desk lady like what this building is now, because it stopped being a hotel in 2011.
She said, it's residential.
Apartments. So
Residential.
imagine like moving here and not knowing that you're like living in a haunted hotel room where people died and stuff.
Fucked up, man.
It's definitely haunted. Bye.